What's up YouTube, and welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. As you can see, I've got the Forester inside. I don't even know the last time it was inside the garage, because I know last year before I went to Haida Gwaii, I did that little bit of maintenance work outside in the driveway. I put a power window motor outside, so I think it's probably been like close to 2 years since I've had this thing back in my garage. All of the parts have arrived for it. So we're gonna go over that stuff, and I'm possibly going to start jacking it up and pulling some parts off, but it's mainly to go over all of the parts I purchased to do the lift, and it's a lot of stuff sitting here. It's actually more parts than I had for the Impreza when I did the suspension and brakes on that car. So this is literally all suspension components and some CV axles. Starting over at this end in these two larger brown boxes, I actually have the rear knuckles for the Forester, and they're complete with bearings and hubs already pressed in. These were kind of a hot deal, and not normally would I have gone to purchase these because of the cost that kind of sits behind them, but we'll go talk a little bit more about them as we get them unboxed. Sitting next in these lower boxes are some trailing arms. And then we've got some lateral arms or rear control arms, both forward and rearward. And in this bigger Moog or Moog box, I have the adjustable arms, so I won't be using the factory alignment bolts. This is going to kind of be set up like my wagon was quite a few years ago. Next up is the front control arms. I am upgrading them to the aluminum control arms. Unfortunately, the listing was only for Impreza, and kind of just reading through some forums and doing my own little research, I figured out that the Impreza arms will actually bolt onto the Forester no problem. It's just the rearward control arm bushings that need to be changed out because the bracket is a little different. It actually sits quite lower on an Impreza. Undo that nut on the end, slide the new control arm bushing on, and bolt it back up. So I'll be converting these to go onto the Forester. Next up are Track Motive's heavy duty CV axles for lifted vehicles. These have extra extension and articulation. Probably a little bit overkill for what I'm doing. Most people would get away with the stock axle, but I decided I'm getting into it. I'm just going to do the upgrade now. The cost behind these is very similar to just an OEM axle, and I figured, well, now is the time. These two little boxes just beside are some tie rod ends, so I'm just going to replace the outers from now. I really don't think there's any play in the steering whatsoever. This open box beside here is the kind of the secret sauce to this whole thing. This is the lift kit. From what I read, this is the kit to go with for cost effectiveness and quality. You can spend a lot less and get a lot less quality. You can spend a lot more and get a lot more travel, but for my application, this was the way to go. And then to top it all off and replace the 20-year-old suspension that's in the Forester, 4 new struts from this FCS Auto that I actually do have in the Impreza, the exact same ones. They've worked out beautifully so far. No noise, no signs of leaks. So I think these are going to be good for the application to start with. And then, of course, if I need to upgrade later on with a different strut spring combination, I'll have the ability to do so. I think next what I'm going to do is kind of set up, and we're going to pull some of the parts out of the boxes so we can have a look at them. I'll get the lift kit out, some axles, maybe those knuckles, kind of give a look over stuff and see what's actually going into the Forester. As I was getting my little display set up here, I started to think to myself, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. It's still fucking August. We'll start here at the rear knuckle. The first thing that you'll notice is it's actually for drum brakes. I am retaining the drum brakes. I certainly had the option to get the rear disc knuckle, but I felt that the drum brakes are going to be far superior at low speed braking for 1, and the parking brake holding better for 2. For 3, the Forester actually has the anti-rollback feature with the 5-speed, and with drum brakes, I mean, it grips right on. I think it's just the way to go. Plus, I already have all the drum brake components that have already been replaced in the not so long ago, so it was just a better option, a cheaper option, I think. It's all brand new. You can see just it's even brand new machining there. Brand new backing plate and bearing. It actually came more complete than I thought it was going to. It came with the long bolt, 2 control arm bushings or lateral arm bushings, and a new axle nut. But the thing was, is I actually went ahead and bought new long bolts from Dorman because I wasn't realizing that it came with all these extra parts. And I'll probably use the Dorman bolts. They look galvanized, so they're just a better option to have. Next we have the rear control arms or lateral arms. These adjustable ones, you usually buy 2 per side, but I'm actually going to use just 1 per side with a regular arm so that I can actually adjust toe. But if you put 2 of them on one side, not only can you adjust toe, but you can adjust camber by doing both arms at once. So I've done this actually before on my old wagon, and they come with these you know, things to kind of put on the bar so that you can put on your sway bar link. But in the Forester, I'm going to be deleting front and rear sway bar, so I really don't have to worry about this thing. Not only is getting one of the arms solid a cheaper option, but to be honest, I've had these in my wagon before, and these bushings seem to fail prematurely. They certainly fail faster than a factory bushing does. In this application, I'm not going to be getting too rowdy with the Forester, only in the, you know, extreme bumps and, you know, when that kind of stuff happens. But, you know, my wagon, I was really driving the piss out of that car, and so I think that's probably why these bushings failed. But looking at them, I'm not so sure they actually take a factory bushing, so a whole arm replacement might be required if you actually use these and the bushings end up cracking on you. New trailing arms, and main reason just to get rid of some of the rusty components that were on the vehicle, and these were relatively cheap to replace. But of course, getting a new bushing on the one end and then the knuckle having a good bushing on the other end kind of replaces every bushing in the rear. The new upgraded front aluminum control arms, the same ones that I put in the Impreza. These are just a much better option, a little bit stronger. The front control arms in these years of Imprezas and Foresters actually had a recall here in Canada where the control arms rotted away and, you know, kind of just broke off on some vehicles. I'm not sure if it was a US recall as well or not, but this just is a much stronger option. And then I have the Forester control arm bushings that need to be changed. You can see how different the actual bracket is one to the other. I don't have to worry about the sway bar link location, even though I think it does bolt up in the stock location on this arm. But I'm not going to be using them in the front, so it's not something I really have to worry about. The axles. Now, I actually did the right front axle on the Forester 2 years ago before I went to Jasper, and it was in really bad shape. It was just chattering away really hard. But these last few months, the left front has started to make some noise, and it's tapping away. It isn't as bad as what the right front is, but I was like, well, I'm going to need at least the one axle. And then I started thinking about the rears and how many people have actually popped rear axles from doing a lift. It's not a common thing, but it does happen. And the axles in the Forester are extremely old. So I just decided, well, let's see what kind of options there are, because I actually did the same type of upgrade in a friend's Outback. It's one of my earliest videos where I did the aluminum control arms and some front heavy-duty axles. When I found these that were an option for the Forester and the price of them, I just decided to do both the front and rear, left and right, because you should be doing them in pairs to make sure everything stays balanced. So these axles are the extra extension, so they actually have an extra, I believe it's 40 millimeters of extension in the axle. It's like another 23 or 24% articulation out of the axle. So these are a little bit overkill, and the option to go a little bit higher is there with these axles, I'm pretty sure. So I'll always keep that in mind. And to finish it all off, Anderson Design Fabrications lift kit, 2-inch front, 2.5-inch for the rear, and the 2-inch trailing arm spacers. course, all the hardware to put everything together. These are actually offset, and so they will give you a little difference in camber. It's kind of hard to see on camera maybe, but the angles are a little bit offset anyway. And that will improve some of the alignment when it comes time to do one. Another thing I noticed is, for those, you know, there's probably a couple of guys out there that watched my saggy butt spacer video, and when I kind of tack welded those studs in place, well, I mean, you can see they just basically welded in some bolts right into the mounts. It's not a bad thing. Don't worry about it if you have to do it. It just goes to show that you can. I may actually go ahead and get some stainless hardware just because I prefer it. The long bolts, I'm not going to be able to do anything about those. Those are really fine thread for how big and long they are. That's pretty much everything. The struts are black. There's a couple other small things like floor mats and mud flaps, and I got like a little tent thing to put on the back for when I go camping, but I'll show all that stuff another time. I was going to roll out a wheel tire combo, but I've decided no, I'll save that for another video as well. You'll notice the wheels that were up on this shelf for like the last 5 years and a few hundred videos, they're now painted with the tires mounted on those wheels. It's an awesome looking combo. It's going to work really well, and I kind of can't wait to show it off, but I am going to wait. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.